And good evening all, and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Night Live in the postseason. And I'll hand you over to Pete, our host. How are you going, Peter?
G'day, mate. How you going? Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us tonight. Great to have you all aboard for another edition of the Tuesday Night Live Crowcast. And the postseason news just keeps racking up. We thought we might have a look at other sports, but gee, there seems to be plenty happening in the world of AFL. The AFL seem to have that nicely structured so that it just keeps going and going and going until we hit the pre-season. So before we know where we are, it'll be the pre-season competition. But anyway, without further ado, we'll introduce tonight's panel. Joining Phoenix and I will be the usual panellists, Nikki and Macca. How are we tonight, guys?
Very good, thank you.
Very well, thank you.
Great to have you aboard. And obviously the biggest bit of news happening this week is the draft happening in a couple of days on Friday. So that's going to be really interesting to talk about. There's been a few other things happening. So we will chuck over to Nikki for a little bit of news for this evening.
I just thought off the bat we'll just get the numbnut out of the way in Stephen Dank, who has his appeal currently before the AFL.
And that's the end of the show.
we'll just wrap it all up there. That's good.
His father-in-law apparently is sick and he can't front the appeal. So he has to get a letter from his doctor. Yeah, I'm going to wonder what sort of doctor he knows. And, yeah. Are they still on the register or not? We don't know.
If you were his father-in-law, you'd feel a bit ripped off not getting all the good stuff, wouldn't you?
I know. He's saving it all for Graham Corns. Hence lovely softball interviews on 5AA. Idiots. He basically said what we've thought all along, lying through his teeth. He has no evidence. He also, interestingly, News Corp, he owes $2 million to. And I think he's got lawyer fees, etc., around $90,000 awaiting him. So he may have to go into a little bit of bankruptcy once again.
Couldn't happen to another guy, nicer guy.
Yeah. And Essendon, today it was announced that they've come to compensation arrangements with, I think it was only 18 players, though.
Yep. All the lesser lots.
Yeah, which is very interesting. So does that mean that compensation payments are included within certain other players re-signing with Essendon?
Who knows? I want to know why it doesn't have an impact on their TPP. Because it's basically a reimbursement for lost earnings.
Yeah, but I mean, if they were to go down that particular path, I mean, Essendon wouldn't be able to operate.
Yeah, but you got to wonder too, Macca. They played a bunch of also-rans and ring-ins last year. How did they pay 95% of TPP? There's must have been some overpaid bloody spuds in that team last year.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. And unfortunately, the AFL or Essendon don't seem to make any of those particular curly questions available to people like us to analyse it, because we mightn't perhaps agree with what goes on. But you've raised very good questions there, but I haven't seen the answers in print anywhere to be able to elaborate further on it.
Well, then you may as well not be here, Macca. See you later.
Hang on. Have you read them?
I wouldn't have a clue. I asked the questions. That lets me off the hook.
Hang on, you know, Nikki?
You two are starting early tonight, aren't you?
I'm not going to. This guy has to go. I mean, I know he operates. I don't know how we're going to work then. No, getting serious though, Phoenix. I don't know that any of us know what goes on.
No, it's all the usual fly by the seat of your pants, make it up as you go along, I reckon.
The other thing that you were saying about Dank there that I need to mention is the fact that he made the comment that he has all the evidence that would get the Brownlow medal back for Joe Watson. But that is a ridiculous comment of that guy to make, because if you really did have such evidence, you wouldn't let the guy lose it in the first place.
He has said all along he's had evidence. He's had so many chances to present this evidence and he never has. The appeal that he's up against which was supposed to start this week. He only talked to an anti-doping expert on the weekend, asked if he could help him. He's had a year to prepare and he's done nothing. So he's liar, pants on fire, and he has been the entire way through.
Well, is it right to say that I heard the AFL had the commission were going to rule within 24 hours about whether they were going to accept his reason for not appearing, and it would seem to me that he's just about ready to get a life ban regardless.
He's got.
Well, that's what he's got.
Got until Friday to come up with evidence of the fact why he didn't appear.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So we'll just there we go. That's off to the side.
Yeah.
Focus going on.
I swear
for
Pete's
years
going to start snoring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about to just bring the hatchet down on that, I think. But moving along, as much as I'd love talking about the Essendon drug scandal, because we haven't talked about it very much. Favourite topic. But anyway, we've given that a good shake. So what else have we got on the board there, Nikki?
So let's move on to some fun things of, are we going to have Guernseys and on-field gear for our players, seeing that BLK's gone into administration? So that's an interesting little thing that's happened over the past couple of weeks. I think a lot of people would actually be very happy if we no longer have BLK gear.
What's been the latest from the club? I mean, they've basically confirmed that they've gone into administration, but we don't really know what's happening, do we?
Well, people have asked him a couple of questions on Twitter, and he has responded saying that they've got some wheels in motion. By the sounds of the tweets, reading between the lines, I think we are definitely looking at somebody else to come in and fill the void. Training did kick off yesterday and there was new gear, which the guys were wearing. But as has been pointed out today, BLK gear on the Chromania site and on the BLK website, it's all been disappeared. You can't purchase that stuff anymore. So I'd say there's definitely some moves afoot.
Well, they must have terminated the contract then.
It affects not only us, it affects another 5 AFL clubs, and
yes,
apparently is it all the SNFL clubs as well?
Yeah, I think. How many SNFL clubs have it?
I'm not sure actually. I thought there was some other stuff there.
I got the impression
ISC or something.
Yeah, there's ISC. I think there's Jacks. Because I know they've pretty much been centrals, haven't they?
Yeah. I reckon, though, by round one next year, I reckon we'd have a Guernsey, though, wouldn't we?
Well, we can wear the women's Guernsey.
I reckon we'll have a Guernsey.
Despite the fact that they've got yellow underboob, we could probably pull that off for a couple of games while we sort something out.
I'm just trying to think of the shape of some of our boys, as whether they're a women's fit or not.
There'd be an old brown suitcase sitting in the corner of a change room somewhere.
Yeah.
And it'll have a stack of Guernseys from years gone by, and I'm sure we can get those out, and I'm sure we'll be right round one.
Either that or we can play skins.
That might increase the crowds.
Yeah, but the other point, of course, is we've lost some sponsorship money as well, apparently.
Yeah.
So obviously we would like to get ourselves another sponsor if that's the case. And I think that, we'd and as I said, there's another 5 AFL clubs in the same boat as us who'd like to know really what they're going to be wearing in terms of who's Guernsey and also the sponsorship money just to keep the incomes up at the level that they've budgeted for.
Because the main issue is that you can't buy old Guernseys and throw them on because they have imprinted into them previous sponsors. So you've got to somehow cover those ones up and make sure new ones are on there.
Well, they've got a bit of tape at the club.
A bit of tape, I would have thought, be right, wouldn't it?
Because that's where most of your money comes from in terms of sponsorship for those other ones, that they're, who gets to go on the shorts, who gets to go on the chest, there's levels of sponsorship in terms of who's on the coach's polos.
Well, if Nige is in charge of, Nige is chief operating officer, so we might wear the state Guernseys.
That'll go down well.
Just moving on, there was something that I just wanted to send a shout out about, was the unfortunate news that just broke today, was the Chris Jarman being released from his contract from Richmond, which was quite unfortunate, and he's come back to pre-season to start pre-season in not great nick. and it looks as though things just haven't quite worked out there. And we all know that he had a few issues last year, and so not that he would be listening to this, but we'd certainly wish him all the best, and unfortunate to hear of that situation developing with Richmond.
And to me, that just highlights what I'm trying to think of the name of the Richmond player who had depression and who on social media just went to town.
Oh yeah,
on Richmond, and I think this is possibly another case involving that this is what's happening, that Richmond actually are not on the ball in terms of player welfare.
Oh, I think that might be a bit of a
Maybe.
stretch. He's from all reports.
I mean, he always has had issues regarding weight. We do know that.
It wasn't a weight issue.
But if it's compounded by some other things.
He was actually training during the break with a personal trainer and trying real hard. This is purely a personal issue. It's a mental health issue, and I think it'd be a bit rough to. I mean, Richmond have carried him for a season on a contract, and he came over with this condition from Carlton, and it obviously wasn't disclosed. You wonder whether there's some recourse between Richmond and Carlton with regards to disclosing information, but who knows? But you're right, Pete. You feel for a bloke like Chris Jarman. He had tons of ability, and unfortunately, it's things have just got on top of him.
Yeah, Pete. Sorry, Phoenix. You made the comment about the personal trainer. Although what the AFL site says is the fact that he didn't come back in good physical condition in spite of that.
Well, that might be the case, but he was certainly giving it a crack. He'd been, according to reports I heard on SEN, he'd been training pretty hard through the break to try and make weight. But obviously, through one thing or another, it didn't happen for
him. No, sorry, Matt, you go.
I was just going to say, it just goes to show, though. I mean, I don't remember back in SANFL days when things weren't so oppressive on a player to perform, how we think the AFL players have a life of luxury, but unless you're perhaps, really at the very top, but even then Buddy Franklin had the same problem. It just goes to show there's a lot of mental pressures go on a player. You think, they're idolised, they get paid a lot of money, and yet still suffer depression. So, there are parts of AFL footy that obviously aren't as good as it seems.
Having said that, though, Macca, you've got to tip your hat to the fact that these days it's accepted for a bloke to come out and say that he's got some mental health issues. You remember, who was that North Melbourne bloke a few years ago? It was really the first one to come out with...
yes, I know.
Tall guy. Was on the media for a while.
He was a forward, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah. I can see him. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. But, since then, gradually and with more public awareness, at least this isn't something now that Chris has to soldier on with, because that often can end up with worse consequences. So it does say a bit for society in general, I guess, and also the AFL in particular, that these blokes can come out now quite freely and say, look, I'm battling these demons, and generally speaking, the media are respectful, and the clubs are, for all intents and purposes, supportive.
Well, you've got Kennett, who's done a lot of really good work with Beyond Blue, and especially bringing this to the attention. So he has a lot of clout within those circles.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly wish Chris all the best, and hope that things go well for him in the future. Just looking at the chat, saying hello tonight to Corey Wade, who was going to join us tonight for a bit of a chat on the draft, but just got waylaid. But he is there on chat for us. So, Corey, we might ask you to message in at some point some of your thoughts on the draft, just so that we can relate those and pretend that we have some expert knowledge with that coming up. But just before we get to that, I thought that the other major bit of news that we should probably have a chat about that affected the Crows was, of course, the non-nomination of Ben Jarman. A lot of talk about this, and has been a major story for the last few days. What are the thoughts on how that's transpired? There's been some conflicting stories in the media. There's been some innuendo relating to whether the Jarmans were actually informed and what they were informed. And Mark Rashuda came out on radio and said that there'd been no promises made, but there seems to be some conflicting stories about, and there just seems to be a little bit of angst, unfortunately, with one of our Legends families. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just might jump in there. Graham Corns was talking about this on 5AA on last Friday, and he said that it's arisen through a misunderstanding between the club and Jarman and his parents, in the fact that the club said that they were going to nominate him, but also did add that they would take him in the order that they have rated him. And the Jarmans interpreted it as a binding situation rather than a situation that the club did the initial nomination, probably with the intention of trying to get him as a rookie later.
There you go.
So it's all clear then? Well, that's okay.
Well,
remember when we were discussing him a few weeks ago, and we kind of thought that he was late third, fourth, that seemed to be where he was. So he's not really a high draft pick. Everybody has said all along he is possibly a bit too small, a bit too slow. If you are comparing him to Caleb Daniels, Daniels was playing senior footy at the same age, playing it in a team that was actually competing in the finals, and he was beating AFL-listed players. This is something that Ben has not done.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's arguing or querying the club's rating of Ben. I don't think that's in question. Everyone knows that Ben is got a bit. Even Darren comes out and says that Ben's got a little bit of development to go before he's an AFL ready player, and Darren himself has said, 2 years time. Let's see if he grows a little and develops a little more. The issue I think that everyone or the people that are annoyed about is this whole issue of miscommunication, and I find it difficult to believe that there's been a miscommunication between the club and the Jarmans, because it's not something I think that there can be a miscommunication about. It's not a casual conversation down the pub. They would have been talking on and off for weeks, months. I mean, they had been training with the club earlier in the season. This has been an ongoing dialogue between the club and the family. And when Andrew Jarman was played Rashudo's rebuttal yesterday afternoon, I think it was met with it, and I think Lewis asked him what he thought of it, and Andrew Jarman responded with a stony silence and no comment, which for me is far more telling than anything Andrew Jarman would actually say. And notwithstanding that, I know through my own connections that he was definitely told he was going to get picked. And then he was told later that he wasn't going to get picked. So if there's been a miscommunication between the club and the family, or a misunderstanding between the club and the family, that's on the Crows. That's poor communication by Adelaide, because there really should not have been any miscommunication whatsoever.
I don't think anybody would argue with that, because it's not that complicated a topic to describe it. That's what Cornsey said, and he said that it has created a lot of acrimony by the Jarman camp, that they do feel they sort of got dudded, although the Crows maintain that they did make it clear, but perhaps they weren't being listened to clearly at the end. It's a situation that, I agree with you. It's not a situation that it should be that complicated. You can't make it clear what's really going on. But Cornsey does maintain that it is a situation that somehow or other, whoever made the contact with the Jarmans and told them what the situation is going to be, didn't obviously make it clear enough.
Yeah, the strategy itself is sound. Don't nominate him, and therefore you don't get shafted or forced into a corner with regards to maybe taking him before you want to. And then assuming he gets through, we either take him with a very late pick or we pre-select him in the rookie draft and it costs us, our very last rookie draft pick. That in itself is a sound strategy. But it's not that hard to keep the Jarmans across that. And again, my connection suggests that there is a little bit of interest from a couple of Melbourne clubs in Ben. And you would imagine most teams would rate him similarly and with the similar question marks based on his physical or some of his physical attributes. But there might be a Melbourne club like a North Melbourne who are willing to take a punt just on the fact that he's such a silky player. Different clubs are at different ends of their development cycle. And a club that is starting to rejuvenate like a North Melbourne, they might think that it's worthwhile having Ben sit on a list for a couple of years and see how he goes. But given the history, and without turning this into a soap opera, given the history between the club and that family, and let's not forget that the Edwards are connected by the two wives, Mandy and Sue, and given the history that Tyson's had with the club and that Mandy's had with the club, and the fact that Jackson is likely to be a first-round pick next year or very close to, surely the club should be managing this situation much better with a longer-term view. A, to try and, respect and honour a club legend, and B, from a strategic point of view and a pragmatic point of view, keep the family happy because, it's not just Ben we're talking about, it's Jackson and maybe, another brother as well in a couple of years' time. Since David Noble has left the club, our communication both outwardly and obviously internally has been severely lacking.
Can't argue with that point. That's absolutely true. There were a lot of people that you were giving David Noble a few raspberries and saying it's good that he went, etc. But I disagree with that. I think that David Noble had the situation very much under control, and that when he haven't performed very well perception is that we haven't performed very well since David Noble left. Having said that, if we take out all the emotion out of the situation, there are hundreds of young footballers nominated for this particular draft. And the obligation of the Adelaide Football Club is to pick the best players possible for the Adelaide Football Club, because they are the people that are going to eventually play for the club or hopefully play for the club, and that they are fortunate for a flag lie on that, not on emotion. So I do support the club in its situation of not making him a father's son, and it might be that he doesn't even get rookie or whatever by the Adelaide Football Club, or you may go somewhere else. But I don't think amongst all the players that have been nominated, he's that high that it really matters. But having said that, I do think where we have broken down poorly is that if David Noble was still there with the Adelaide Football Club, I don't think we would be facing this situation.
No, I agree.
Can I just ask, sorry, am I given to understand that there's a relationship with the wives? Are they sisters or sisters-in-law? What?
They're sisters.
Yeah, they're sisters.
They're sisters, are they?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's and it's a close family. Ben and Jackson are close. Sue and Mandy are close. Yeah, the family is a close family. And, I don't disagree with anything you said, Macca, and I don't think anyone's really arguing that at all, in terms of his rating. It comes down to how you manage that situation. And look, even the Jarman family have been very realistic about where Ben sits in the pecking order. My conversations with my connections a few weeks ago suggested that they knew he was around about a fourth-round pick, and at that stage, Ben was, as I think I made mention on this podcast, Ben was considering not accepting any nomination and just going into the draft as it's turned out, just because he'd just be happy to get drafted. I think actually the family are probably more annoyed with the club than Ben is. I think Ben would likely be disappointed, but I think the family are more annoyed because I think they felt they deserved better. But I know, that Ben really just wants to get drafted and play out and get on an AFL list. So that's where it stands.
Can someone with more intimate knowledge than I do of the draft rules perhaps just try and elaborate a little bit on why it would be, what motivation there would be for us to come out 2 weeks ago and say that we are nominating him as a father-son pick?
We had to, Pete.
So why was that?
Well, because it's a two-stage nomination process, right? In order to be able to either nominate him in the national draft or pre-select him in the rookie draft, we had to hit that first deadline of a couple of weeks ago.
Correct.
I think the comments that were made at the time from Justin Reid, pardon me, were very much around the lines of there's still a long way to go, but we had to put this nomination in today and we were happy to do so. I think that was pretty much his words. The deadline then that came up last Friday was specifically for the national draft. So the first deadline was for both, and then it had to get narrowed down last Friday to the national draft. So if we wanted to nominate him and take him in the national draft, we had to lodge paperwork by Friday. The fact that we didn't means that he does not go into the national draft as a father-son selection, which means that we're not entitled to any discount if we want to pick him up in the national draft. But what that means is that then we nominated him. I'm pretty sure we actually have already nominated him or are likely to nominate him for the rookie draft, which happens after the pre-season draft. And
Well, that must have been the motivation. What other motivation could there have been?
Yeah, because what happens then is if we want to pick him up in the rookie draft, we actually pre-select him, so we nominate him before the draft is carried out, and it costs us our last rookie pick. So even if we rate a couple ahead of Ben in the rookie draft, we pre-select him in the rookie draft. That costs us our last rookie pick, so we'd still get to use our first couple.
Absolutely correct. That's exactly the reason why we would have nominated him in the first place.
Yep, that's right. And again, nothing wrong with the strategy, Mako, I don't reckon. Just the communication and the way that the family have been dealt with in this situation. Even if it was a misunderstanding, that's still not good enough. There should have been no question about what was going on. And there obviously was, because Tyson came out on Saturday morning radio reporting that the family were upset. KG had sources, which was obviously Andrew, saying that they'd reneged. So there was enough upheaval from very close associates to Ben, Darren and Sue. And I heard the same thing on Saturday morning before either of those two blokes went on air from a similarly close source. So there's absolutely no doubt that the club messed up this communication, whether it was a reneging or a misinterpretation. It should have been handled better. And it probably points to the fact that Reedy should not be in charge of media communications.
Well, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, that's where it sits, pretty much.
Well, it was certainly quite a bit of a storm and an unfortunate situation, I think, particularly given the close relationship of the families and the fact that we now have one upset mother whose sister is the mother of a lad that could possibly be nominated next year for father-son. It just doesn't. I just have seen those kind of situations before, and I just a little bit concerned for next year. Would we?
Well, without gossip mongering, Pete, don't forget that Mandy was tied up in a controversy back in Tyson's playing days. So it's taken a long time for that situation to settle down, notwithstanding the way the club handled Tyson's last season and retirement. It hasn't been smooth sailing between the Edwards family and the Adelaide Crows either. And if Ben happens to get picked up by a Melbourne club, And if there continue to be ongoing angst between the Edwards and Adelaide, I don't think Jackson would probably mind going to Melbourne.
Yeah, but I think that'll become irrelevant in the long run. That's a year's time from now, and
well, they've got some work to do.
Do you honestly know what mothers and their sons are like?
Well, I know what the mothers are like.
Well, I know what mine was like. She's absolutely bloody biased, but you're quite right. But sons, of 18 years of age, they've got an ambition to play footy, and they'll have an ambition where they want to play footy as well. So I would be amazed if that affected the situation with the Edwards kids.
This is a bloke there, Macca, who's a Hall of Fame. The guy won us our first 2 flags. Ben's father. He deserves better from the club than a miscommunication, in my view.
But nobody's arguing that particular point.
No, but the club should recognise that particular point, in my view. It should never have gotten to this stage. And, it might be seen as a bit of a wank, that was 20 years ago or whatever. It doesn't matter. Darren was integral to our first 2 premierships. And the club owes the Jarman family quite a bit. Not only Darren, but also Andrew, as well as the Edwards. I mean, Tyson played 400 or 300 odd games, there's a lot of history there with that particular family, and the club needed to handle it better. And I hope that someone behind the scenes has taken control of the situation so it doesn't happen again.
I'm sure Fags will be looking into that, I'm sure, because he doesn't like having these type of things happen, and I'm sure that he'll be looking at it and making sure it doesn't happen again. But I think more importantly, it's not a great start for Justin Reid in any circumstance, whether it be in trading or this situation. I've got a real question mark on the guy, and I think he's got to do something good to prove himself, because he's had a pretty lousy start.
Well, let's rule a line under that one and move to more positive things, and that's on Friday. We have the AFL National Draft coming up, and always a very exciting time. Always like having presents under the Christmas tree, which is great. So perhaps has anybody got any initial thoughts on pick 13?
Well, it's got
no idea.
But it has to be a midfielder. That's the one thing I think that we'd all agree upon, that the club is really lacking in the midfield to be... we could not rate our midfield up amongst the very, very best. And this is the year of the midfield of the draft. So I would be very disappointed if we didn't come out with somebody who, within the next 2 years at least, would be in our side and making a difference if they couldn't do that. And, one of the names that keeps getting thrown around is a guy called Venables, who's he's a tough kid who also gets a lot of the ball, and he can play both in and out. So he'd be one possibility. But
has he got the class, Venables, Macca, do you reckon?
Well,
he's got a fair bit of grunt about him, but has he got the class that we need? We've got a lot of grunt in our midfield already.
You raised a good point there, and he may not be the man. He's just that everybody, not everybody, but a lot of the mock drafts pop him into that spot, probably because it fits nicely. But you're probably right. I'd say the club itself will have their eye on somebody that, and it might not be him. It might be somebody who's got more pace, who plays a little bit more outside, and has got perfect disposal, etc. They'll be the requirements they're looking for, I would think. And we've been very, very good in recent years at not giving away who we're after, and but coming up with a good player. So I'm sure it will be a midfielder. It'll probably be one that plays a little bit more outside than in, and with pace and with good foot skills. And I think that'd be the qualities that we'd be looking for.
A couple of phantoms I see have Will Brodie slipping to us, and a very, very highly rated player, probably in most of the power rankings that I've seen, who's been rated as a top 4 or 5 player. But just notice a couple of phantom drafts have him sneaking into 13, and I saw a tweet from Emma Quayle today, who's a bit of a probably the forefront or foremost guru in AFL drafts, and she had him most likely in the top 10, but a possibility of sneaking to us at 13.
Yeah, well, look, Emma Quayle, I think, is probably one of the best authorities on the draft in Australia, and I really tweet, but the only tweets I think I've got in my name were to Emma to ask her questions about the draft in past years, and if she says that's a possibility, it just might happen.
What about, you mentioned that we'd definitely go a midfielder, Macca, and traditionally we've always followed the mantra of first round being best available. What happens if Jared Berry is available at our pick, not necessarily a midfielder as such, but highly rated and particularly strong character? What do you think of him?
Well, a good player. But let me reverse the question back to you. In the sense that has always been the club's philosophy, and they're stating it again that is their philosophy. But sensibly, can they afford to do that given the fact that our midfield, I believe, it just really needs one or two more players in it that have got a little bit of class about them. And we just can't afford not to take a midfielder. And I think our philosophy should be best player available as long as he's a midfielder. So I put it back to you. Do you agree with that?
Point.
I don't necessarily agree with that. And the only reason I say that, Macca, is because I think that we all tend to forget that last year, when it came our turn to I think it was our second first rounder, and we ended up taking Duday, but we actually did put in a bid on a key position player, Harry Himmelberg, who GWS ended up matching, and so we didn't get him. But clearly at that point there was thought of taking a key position player, and so if we're thinking of taking a highly rated key position player early in last year's draft, does that tell us that there's potential for us to be looking at someone like a Marshall, who's the highest rated key position player, who could possibly float through to us, or similarly the young lad from North Adelaide, and his name just escapes me now, no, not Snelling, Will Hayward from North Adelaide, and him being a bit of a jumping jack, a third tall, almost like a Jake Stringer type, but with potential to go through the midfield. So he's a bit of an X-factor player. And the other one that seems to have come into calculations just in the last few days as well is a lad by the name of Cedric Cox. And so, again, a bit of an X-factor player, a bit of a sort of a pacey, more of a pacey outside midfielder. So whilst I tend to agree at first blush, Macca, that a midfielder seems to be on the menu, I'm always conscious of the fact that we did go that way last year, and if we could have, we would have got a key position player.
Oh, look, Pete, you're right in the sense that that's been the club's philosophy and is still the club's stated philosophy. But in my opinion, I don't think we can afford to follow that particular philosophy this year, unless. The only way you would actually break away, to continue that particular philosophy, is if there was such an outstanding player that you could not afford not to pick him up. But if you have a look at our goal-to-goal line, a key position player is not really the player that we are busting our bums to get. We're busting ourselves to get a good midfielder.
I'll tell you why I lean towards Berry, Macca. It's his size, and whilst he's not an earmarked midfielder as such, he certainly does carry the ball. And what we lack, or what, in my opinion, we've lacked over the last couple of years in our midfield is a little bit of IQ, a bit of footy IQ. We have a lot of blokes who are very good at the athletic stuff, and they'll offer themselves up and run all day, but we don't have those smart little players that know when to give and when to go, like a Pendlebury or someone like that in his prime. And to me, Berry offers something that's a little bit different to a lot of the more stereotype midfielders that are at the top end of the draft. A lot of those top end players still have question marks over disposal, which to me is a bit of a worry. Berry just to me looks a more complete footballer and a very resilient type, and who will, a bit like Jake Lever. You know how Jake Lever was barking orders within his first 10 games for the Adelaide Crows. Well, I think
First game.
I think Berry is a very similar type. I don't think he's going to be a shrinking violet on the field. And if he's still available at our pick, I'd love us to take him, irrespective of midfield, halfback flanker, high half forward, whatever. I think he's the one for me.
Look, you might be right, but my only concern is the fact is that we don't have a second round draft pick, and we dropped right away to about 42, is it?
43.
43 before our next draft pick, and by 43, the eyes are going to be picked out of the class midfielders by then.
Well, yes and no. It goes fairly deep, Macca, but we've already. I mean that you can't look back in hindsight and say, well, we're not in the second round. I mean that was the club's strategy, not to trade back into the second round. So clearly, whatever strategy we have going into this draft, we feel that 13 and 43 are going to net us a couple of players, and there's still a bit down there at 43. There's that young lad from North Adelaide. What's his name? Graham. He should be around the mark at 43. There's a couple of others that are around that mark, and I think this is the strategy that the club's gone for. So I would actually be really surprised if they overlook Berry if he was still there at 13, just because I know we always pick guys with character.
The interesting thing is, if we look back at last year's draft, we only participated in the first two rounds. And this year we've got a first rounder, a third rounder, and then we keep going after that for about another 3 or 4 picks. So it's been very interesting how we handle it with all our late picks and what type of player we're going to be after once we get to that level.
I've got a feeling if he's available, we might go Hayward at 13. He's a homegrown product. He has potential to run through the midfield, and just has has significant X factor, and had a terrific chance, kicking a whole stack of goals, a magnificent contested mark. Just got a funny feeling that we may go for a player in a kid that's got a ton of upside, and then perhaps try and pick up a solid midfielder with 43. And just notice Corey on chat telling us that plenty of really good kids available, still right down into the 50s. And so I've got a funny feeling that they might, what do they call it? Shoot for the stands, swing for the stands on pick 13, and look at Will Hayward. That's my punt if he's available.
Well, the interesting thing is that, and it's good to hear that Corey says that there will be good kids available there, because I rate Corey's opinions, and if he says that, well, then there are. So that's the good part of it. But as far as the first round pick is, that the Adelaide Footy Club's been, I mean, we never heard of Patrick Dangerfield really being mentioned by anybody prior to the draft itself. And yet, he proved to be the best player in that particular draft, and the club identified it as such. So we may well have somebody identified, and we could guess here all day and not come up with the answer.
I don't know where you were when the Dangerfield draft, but he was well and truly identified.
Not as going to Adelaide, though.
No, but he was identified as a first-round pick. He was certainly in calculations.
Yeah, but not as hot. No, the average. Well, I had looked back at the mock drafts afterwards, and he was more rated towards the end of the first round.
Yeah, no, that's true. And we took a punt because the knock on Paddy back then was his disposal, and his
knock's still on his disposal.
Well, that's right. It's just that everything else he does is so bloody good you can overlook it.
Yeah.
It
so
is
I
going to be
got it right.
Yeah, we got it right. It was how it was weighed that was the differentiating factor with other clubs. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think we'll go Hayward, Pete. To be honest with you, I don't know why we would, apart from the best talent available, and I don't even think it's the best talent available. at that number?
See, I think what we've done previously is that Ogilvy seems to have quite a good understanding of what the other clubs are also very interested in. And so he's done a lot of calculations to ensure to get the players that he's wanted at those drafts. Like dropping back those couple of draft picks last year, he wasn't fussed about that at all because he knew he was still going to get what he wanted and what we needed for our list. And I think they've probably done quite a bit of, they would have already done quite a bit of work. And so, Macca, for me, if we have one of those nice tools who is available at that, like, so if Berry is available, we would then sit back and go, okay, so what's our calculations? What are we going to get with the next one? And I think if he does go with Berry, he's definitely got a plan later down the track that he's going to be comfortable. What he gets is going to assist our list.
Yeah, that's probably true, but it's a long way down when you're going down from 13 to 43. There's 30 or 29 picks in between, and it's you'd really be gambling on whatever player you're going to get down there because while I think that the top perhaps 15 players are pretty well identified usually, and that not all of them, but I think that Ogilvy, and like many other clubs, will be able to sort of lock in that player will be taken by this club and that player will be taken by that club, etc., etc. So usually at least the top 10, the only change to them normally is perhaps you might get a little bit of a shuffle in the top 10. After that, you might get maybe an odd smoky start to appear in the next 10. But so I think yes, I think Ogilvy will have a very good idea who he can get at 13. But it's still going to be very hard to identify definitely what you're going to get at 40, and that's where you do get your surprises.
Can I just respond to Will Hayward and what we're saying before about him? And now, Feeney just mentioned that he was not in the conversation at pick 13, and yet he's actually been invited to the AFL draft on Friday night. And as I read it, that indicates that there's certainly some clubs out there that are intending picking him as potentially as a top 10 draft pick. So he's definitely in the conversation as a top 10 pick, and I would think
they invite more than the top 10, don't they?
I think we'd be lucky to get him at 13, to be honest, in the end. But
don't they invite the first 20 or something?
I'm just reading that if he's invited, it means that there's been some indication by at least one club that he could go top 10.
Yeah, okay. Well, that'll be interesting. And maybe a needs-based situation, given that he's quite different to most of the other players in that first-round calculation. Who knows? The one thing I'll say to what you were saying, Macca, before is that you're right. Usually after the first 10 or 15, it's a bit of a raffle, but I do think that this draft is quite unique in terms of its depth, and whilst there might be a few standouts, it's quite even from, say, 20 to 40 or even 20 to 50. There's not a huge amount of gaps, and there's still a few gems to be had late down the draft. For those who log on to Crows Fan Central, Corey, who is a sometime contributor for us on the podcast, has written an article that we'll post up tonight or tomorrow morning, and he identifies at 43 a bloke called Mile Pohoke from Dandenong, and I'll just read the description. Corey, thanks very much. A midfielder who can play forward, who is also strong overhead, is the type of player every club should be looking at. Strong in the air, he's also a smooth mover around clearances, who is very clean below his knees and moves very well in and out of traffic. Offers run and carry on the outside, but can finish a game with a very high tackle count. Playing inside, doesn't have the tank yet, but plays hard and tough. And Corey's likened him to a Luke Parker type. Now, if you can pick up a player like that at 43, I'd be pretty happy, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd call his name Sloane.
Yeah, that sounds similar to Rory as well.
We got Rory at 44.
Yeah, so I think the depth is something that would probably have played into calculations with Ogilvy, I reckon, and may well have been why we weren't too fussed, not getting back into the second round.
The one thing I'm not worried about is with Ogilvy and he's got a masterly track record in my opinion, and the guy obviously has got a network out there that helps him, but he is a master in talent identification. And the interesting thing will be, though, is that we've got 6 picks, and our last pick is pick 90, and I think there's one in the low 80s before that. Do you guys think we're going to go the whole 6, or are we going to go 1 or 2 players short and increase our rookie numbers? What do you guys think about that?
Well, there's a lot of confusion about what's actually going to happen with rookies, possibly even not only past next year, but maybe even next year, that it may kind of be gotten rid of. So I think that's your calculations have to include in the fact that there may not be a rookie list.
That's ridiculous, isn't it, Nick? I mean, there's been some talk too that rookies are going to be interchangeable next year as well.
This is stupid.
But how can you plan for a draft with the rules basically changing for the season that you're drafting for? It's just hopeless. I don't know how you can do it, but
welcome to the AFL.
Yeah, how many spots have we got free on our main list at the moment? I lost count now with a couple of retirements.
6.
6 free. Do we reckon O'Brien gets upgraded? I do, personally.
Has been.
Yeah, has been.
I thought he has been.
Yeah, and so is that 6 after the upgrade, Macca?
He'll be pick 90.
So all right, so 5 plus O'Brien.
Hang on.
No, I think it's 6 plus. No, I think it's 6 plus O'Brien.
You're right.
Plus O'Brien. Okay.
Yeah.
He is right.
Do you reckon anyone else comes up? Do you reckon Beach or someone gets promoted?
I get the feeling one of them might be. What we might do is hold off a little bit, and one of them will get promoted later, closer to the season starting.
Not a bad thought, and I wonder whether that possibly could be Hugh Greenwood.
Oh, I'd love it.
I'm
a Greenwood fan.
Him.
But, we might be having, you raised a good point there, Nicky, we might be having a little bit of a bet each way there, in the sense that there could be just a freak situation that somebody that we really like is still sitting there at 90. If they're not, well, we just move on and upgrade one of our rookies.
Because we've got 3 there in 3 different positions. So we've got Greenwood, who is a midfielder. Well, actually, they're similar, but in terms of height, he's a midfielder forward. You've got Beach, who's a midfielder forward, so there's a size differential there. And then you've got Keith in the backlines.
Yeah, I don't know whether they'll move on Keith just yet.
I don't think they will yet, but
the other two,
if push comes to shove and we've lost a defender and we do have to pull someone up, you've got him there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he won't be upgraded at this stage.
There's no bigger fan of John O'Beach than me, being an old Westies player, and I've desperately wanted him to succeed and get an AFL gig. I just have the feeling that he's not quite got what it's going to take, and I just have the funny feeling that they might see Greenwood as having a little bit more upside than John O'Beach if they were going to put one person up.
The one bloke I reckon, Pete, that Beach might be an understudy for or a foil for is Mitch and McGovern up forward. If Mitch starts slow and has a bit of the second year blues, that's the kind of spot that I could see John O'Beach slotting into, because he does play quite tall.
He does.
And he's quite strong through the body. He's a mature body player. And I could, if they wanted to maintain structure and Mitch was down on touch, Beach should be the perfect guy to slot in my opinion.
Yeah,
true.
You got that one right, 100% right, I reckon. Be it injury or form, Beach's best chances of getting a gig would be through McGovern.
All right,
Interesting times.
Yeah, interesting times and plenty happening. Shall we? Do we need to do a numbnut thing, or did we do that at the start?
Dank or the AFL? Take a pick.
Well, why not both?
We'll go with Dank. Why not both?
I can't think of anyone else.
I'm just happy that you've played that now.
Oh, well, that's all right, as long as you're happy.
See, there you go.
I'll just make one comment before we do go. What do you guys think about the departure of Rodney Marsh, which I personally was absolutely ecstatic to see that guy go, and the reshuffling of the Test side?
I thought Ferguson was stiff, but it wasn't unexpected. I think it's a bit rough to give Ferg one test on a bit of a hot deck after 3 knee recos and all the rest of it, and then say see you later. But the writing was on the wall, and he looked very vulnerable. So yeah, it's a pity for Callum because I reckon that's his career.
I just thought the whole exercise was piss weak, and the reason why it was piss weak is what they did is that they tried to make themselves tough by they're going to axe a whole lot of people and rebuild the team, and you know what? All they did was to go after a whole lot of soft targets. All of the people that got the axe were just soft targets, and they didn't do anything structural at all to change that team. So I thought it was piss weak.
Yeah, but who do you reckon's lucky to stay in, Pete?
Well,
out of the
seriously,
top order.
Who wasn't a soft target?
Well, I mean, Warner was picked. Warner was like an obvious pick. Steve Smith, obviously, but the rest of the top 6 are gone. So I don't know who else.
Probably the only one that had to go that wasn't a soft target was Voges, I thought.
Yeah, but he was.
But the rest
go
of
anyway.
Burns is a soft target. Ferguson's a soft target. Manny's a soft target. Just piss weak.
But the point is, Pete, it had to be done, and under Rodney Marsh, our record has been shocking. And
you reckon giving a guy one test match, and in that test match he got run out by a freak throw from almost at the boundary that hit the stump side on, going for a second run, and so you reckon that basically he's had one test innings, and you reckon that's a fair go? No,
I'm not saying that at all about Ferguson, but the one thing that probably killed Ferguson was the fact that in the state game he had 2 very cheap dismissals, and you're taking a guy in who, not his last 4, but his last 3 innings, hasn't virtually made a run. So it's a fair gamble.
What about Manny? What about him?
I thought Manny was the wrong call in the first place, to be honest with you.
Agreed.
But they give him a go, so
yeah,
and then they just drop him after one test.
Yeah, but if you've made...
I mean, I know they're South Australian, so I'm probably being biased, but you wait how many years to get a South Australian in the test team? They give 2 their debut in one test, and they give them one test and they're axed. You're telling me that would happen to a New South Wales player?
Well, no.
No, it wouldn't.
But I mean, if you're looking at it purely from a horses for courses situation, if you've made an error in selection, you need to correct it. And I think Manny was actually an error in selection. I don't think Ferguson was. I think he could have, despite his form in the Shield game, I think he deserved another crack, particularly in Adelaide. But I don't know. Manny shouldn't have been picked in my view. Jackson Bird was dead set stiff not to get a run in Hobart. And I think Jackson Bird's going to be dead set stiff again not to get a run in Adelaide because I'm pretty sure they'll pick Chad Sayers.
Yep, I think you're right. But I think that they did make an error, and if you make an error, you have to correct it, though, Pete.
Well, who says it was an error? I mean, Phoenix is just saying it's an error. That's his view, but how do we know that that's actually the truth?
Well, he hardly got a wicket on a hot deck. He's supposed to be a seam bowler.
So it was his first test.
Yeah,
but on that rationale, then Shane Warne wouldn't have got another match.
Well, he didn't for a while. He did take. Shane Warne did take a while to establish himself.
Just, we didn't get dropped after the game against the West Indies when Lara hit him for 1,000.
Was it only 1,000? I thought it was more than 1,000.
No, it was India, wasn't it? Was it Shastra that made 2,000 that game in Sydney?
There was quite a few thousand runs scored.
I mean, it was ridiculous. Anyway,
yeah, but that's fine. But Many's unfortunately. I mean, Warney, even though he was green back then, he was the only leg spinner we had. We've got about 100 Manys, and Many couldn't have had a better set of conditions to bowl in.
Are you saying we've got many Minis?
We've got many Manys, and Chad Sayers is probably a bit of a mini clone. He's a mini.
Sayers has got a lot more swing in the ball.
Oh yeah, I actually think Chad Sayers will be in the Test team for years to come. He's had to struggle to get to every level. He's had to struggle, but he just keeps getting wickets. He makes the ball move. He puts it on a spot, and he just keeps getting wickets. And he's one of these blokes that in the end the selectors can't ignore him. And I hope he gets picked, and I hope he does well.
Yeah, look, while I agree with you, Pete, about Ferguson, I don't agree with you about Many. I think that Sayers is the guy, a much better choice than Many, and Ferguson definitely stiff.
Fair enough. All right. Did we get a Cockwong nomination in there? I think we just... Oh, did we? It was Dank.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
it was Dank and Dankerfeld.
All right, perfect.
Thank you,
All right.
Phil.
Well, that probably takes us to... Unless anyone's got any save rounds there.
I love your passion about the cricket, Pete.
I just get a gutful of the way South Australian crickets are treated. That's all. It's just disgraceful.
It's the baggy blue now, isn't it? Not the baggy green. There's about 7 of them in there again.
Yeah, they're back to the old tricks. Yep.
Yeah, if you're from New South Wales and you make a couple of 50s, you're in.
You don't even have to make that many, do you?
It's just disgraceful.
Well, the 20-year-old, what's his name, Renshaw? I know he's a young gun and all the rest of it, but talk about going from one extreme to the other in terms of selection. I'm putting a bit of pressure on that lad too.
He's an opener, isn't he?
Yeah.
Well, he'll be under fire. I'll be interested to see how he goes.
Well, particularly if we're coming in in an evening with the pink ball. With that ball moving around, with a bit of moisture around, it's going to be kicking everywhere with their bowlers, Philander and the other bloke.
One of the beauties about being retired, I'll be sitting there watching every ball of it.
Yeah, as will I, Macca, and I was disappointed. If you're talking about a bit of moisture, I reckon there'll be ice on the ball. It's going to be like 10 degrees or something in the evenings. It's going to be absolutely horrendous. So there'll be a huge downturn in beer sales, and then everyone will just be buying hot chocolates, I think.
Well, it's about $100 a schooner now, isn't it? Or a pint now, anyway.
Yeah, well.
Don't worry,
Anyway.
hot chocolate's not much cheaper than that.
Can I have a show of hands on whether who thinks the day-night test is an absolute joke?
I don't like it.
No, I don't like it.
I'm not interested.
And it's the only test that we get, and it's killed the Adelaide test. We don't get the one dayers over Australia Day. Now we get stupid day night.
We have this season.
Yeah, but it's hit and miss these days. All our traditional cricket days are gone in Adelaide.
No,
Yeah,
to me, cricket's a day sport. To me, in the test arena where it really counts, where you slog it out for 5 days, and that's why it is a test. And I love Test cricket, and I much prefer to see it in the daytime.
Yeah, and it's going to be horrendous, this test, because as I said, the forecast is for 10 and 9 and ridiculous temperatures like that, and so everyone's going to be going home at 7 o'clock.
Yep.
So anyway, all right, look, we're just about up to the hour mark, and it's been a great discussion tonight. I've really enjoyed this evening. There's been some really interesting topics, and so I appreciate the input from everybody, and thanks everybody for getting on the chat and helping us out with a few bits and pieces of information. Appreciate it. To all the panel, thanks very much for your efforts this evening.
Very good.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing Corey's article too.
Yep, that'll be posted up by your breakfast tomorrow morning, Macca. And it is a very good article, very in-depth, so he's done a good job, Corey.
Taking it up by about 11 a.m.
Fan, you want to just take us through the call signs there?
Yep, definitely. So get behind us on Facebook, obviously, and Twitter. It's AFL Crowcast. Visit Crowfan Central to catch up on what Corey thinks about the draft coming up and anything else that we might care to write about. Next week, hopefully, we'll have Corey on, but we'll certainly be in a position to discuss what's gone on in the draft, and we'll probably wind it up at that point, won't we, Pete, for the season?
I think so, and we'll certainly have a couple of articles next week on Crows Fan Central, just discussing the draft picks from Friday and some of the new kids that we get coming to the club.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks very much, and we'll thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you all again next Tuesday for the Tuesday night live edition of the Crowcast.
Good night, all.
See ya.